Mr. Mack-Poole, 3-minute history, the Truman Doctrine, 1947. Let's do this. So, what were the causes of the Truman Doctrine? What was the Truman Doctrine? And what were the consequences of the Truman Doctrine? So, a bit of context to the Truman Doctrine. In the run-up to the Truman Doctrine, you've got the telegrams. Notably, you've got the Canaan telegram going to Truman. That telegram basically said you need to contain the USSR, and containment is essentially what the Truman Doctrine is. Guys, a bit of wider context to this Truman Doctrine. Sadly, guys, Britain was a fading power on the decline, and that meant it could not fulfill its obligations to Turkey and Greece to defend capitalism and democracy in those two countries. Truman was worried that these two countries, both Turkey and Greece, would fall to communism. This is known as domino theory. That's the idea that once a neighbour country fell to communism, the following countries next to it, its neighbouring countries, would also fall to communism, like dominoes. He had to stop this. This was his mission. And so therefore, he stepped up and introduced the Truman Doctrine. Now let me elaborate. What was the Truman Doctrine? A doctrine is just a set of ideas. That's all it is. And Truman's doctrine, the Truman Doctrine, was that he was going to stop the spread of communism across the world. So essentially, it's the first policy of containment, and it's the political aspect. It will be followed by an economic aspect, which was known as the Marshall Plan. So in essence, Truman sends investment, diplomatic support, and military aid to both Turkey and Greece to stop communist revolutions occurring in those countries. This then stops the spread of communism, especially towards the Middle East, which was very important to America because of its oil reserves. And in this regard, the Truman Doctrine is successful. Truman makes a big speech to Congress and he says, "I believe it should be the policy of the United States of America to defend democracy across the world," or paraphrasing, something like that. It's seen of major importance because it's his first policy of containment. So what are the consequences of this? Allow me to elaborate. What we would see is the complete political, economic and military divide of Europe due to this policy. A key consequence of the Truman Doctrine was the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was the economic sphere of the Truman Doctrine. We'd see $12 to $13 billion of investment in Western Europe to prop up those post-war economies, which sorely needed that investment. Stalin would also respond with his own policies over Europe. He would introduce Cominform, which was a kind of political response to the Truman Doctrine. He would align all of the Eastern Bloc countries under a Stalinist banner. He would also introduce Comecon. So Comecon is a response to what he called dollar imperialism in the Marshall Plan. So it's not like Stalin doesn't do anything, doesn't sit on his hands. There are clear consequences to the Truman Doctrine. Arguably, we'd also see some political consequences to the Truman Doctrine, as in diplomatic rifts like flashpoints, notably the Berlin blockade and airlift. You could say that the Truman Doctrine raised tensions in Europe, leading in part to that flashpoint, the Berlin airlift and blockade. And by 1955, after the death of Stalin and after Truman's out of power, you see the Warsaw Pact, which is developed. This was, of course, after 1949, where NATO would be developed. So, all in all, guys, we've got a completely strong Iron Curtain dividing Europe. On one side, on the American side, you've got the Truman Doctrine, you've got the Marshall Plan, and you've got NATO. On the Soviet side, you've got Cominform, you've got Comecon, and you've got the Warsaw Pact, a complete political, economic, and military divide in Europe.